What is up, Scrub fam? Pat here once again with the limited review. This time we're going to be talking about the yellow cards for set 8 Malicious Machinations. If you guys missed any of the previous parts, I'll link them in the description down below for you guys so you guys can check that out. The red, blue, and green cards have already been covered. Again, we're going to be covering yellow and black today. I'm going to pop the grading scale up on the screen, and while you familiarize yourself with the scale, I grade things on a scale of 1 to 10. You can see the particulars on your screen right now. Just want to give a shout out to our sponsor here at 3XG Productions and Shenron's there, Alec Pastrana and BeardedCollectibles.com. You guys hear us say it in every video. Alec is the best shop owner on the planet. He is going to give you guys the best prices on sealed product. Get those pre-orders in now for set 8 if you guys have not already. Again, set ships in, pretty much a week at this point, a little less than a week, so not too much time left to go. Also, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. Leaving us a like or a comment down below to let us know how we're doing is also much appreciated. And for those of you guys who are not already and are looking to take your game to the next level, consider the Patreon, which I'll again link down in the description below. So with that out of the way, let us move on to the cards. So first up is Son Goku and Pan, who can transform when awakened into Sonic the Hedgehog, thanks to his amazing remodel from Paramount Pictures. So yeah, this is a really, really good leader for Limited. So in a set where it's built around Constructed, and there's a lot of duds in the set, there's very few great cards. Having a leader that just turns a dud into a bomb on the front side and gets us quickly to our backside is much appreciated. Has a ridiculous awaken ability in not only drawing 2 but also on tapping 2, which lets you have a huge super turn, more so than the standard deck would. And then when you actually become Sonic the Hedgehog, you are a 15k double striker that has the ability to take a life and go right to 1, again getting even more card advantage, and potentially closing out the game right here and now. So, yeah, Goku literally can win the game by himself. And in fact, if your seal pool is really weak, I would strongly encourage you to actually play Super Saiyan 4. Simply because the sheer card advantage and the fact that he makes mediocre cards into serious threats on the front side, and then the back side, the leader can close out the game pretty much 4 damage. You can just do 4 damage with a huge hand size really quickly. So yeah, it's really, really strong, and it's probably the best pick for you if your seal pool is weak. I'm gonna give Goku a 9. I think overall Beerus or SS4 is the pick for most players, unless you open very specific things like 21 Scheme. So yeah, for most players in most sealed pool situations, I would take SS4 Goku. He's a little bit worse in draft simply because the other decks, kind of elevate their game a little bit. They get some more synergy and actually get the cards that they need to function. So yeah, really, really strong leader and one of the best ones to pick up. Conversely, Super Baby 1 is pretty much bottom barrel. Not the worst leader in the set, but as you guys can see from me flipping the leader over here, he is 10k on the back. So his activate main is actually pretty decent, taking 2 cards from life, but there's very few babies in the set, because they're mostly at the uncommon and rare and super rare level, so you're probably not going to have a huge surplus of them. You maybe have anywhere between 2 and 3 in a deck, and looking at top 3, it's not really going to happen. And most of the brainwash cards, as you guys know from the previous red videos, it's not particularly, most of them are not particularly great outside of the 20k Gohan. So even if you do get the draw 3, which is nice, it's not like you're getting an amazing quality card most of the time. And then the backside, just no. This is the main reason, just no. 10k on the back is terrible. No card advantage to speak of. And there's only 1 card in the set, which is Malicious Majesty, as far as I know, that reduces the enemy's leader to 0. I guess if you were really lucky and open the secret, I guess that also is another one. But most people that actually have the cards that reduce it to 0, you're going to have 1 in your whole deck. So your leader, you mean to tell me you're choosing a leader because of 1 card? And the odds are you're not going to see that card every game throughout the entire tournament. You're just literally not going to hit Malicious Majesty every single game for the entirety of a turn. It's just not consistent. It's not happening. If it does happen, either you're really lucky or there's something shady going on. Just please promise me no. Just don't play Super Baby 2. It's just not worth it. SS4 is better almost every single time. I'm going to give Baby a 3. So, next up is Son Goku Path to Godhood. 2 cost 15k is pretty much the sweet spot. That's kind of where we want to be with our 2-drops. We want that or better. The activate main is pretty nice if you happen to have all of the pieces and the super rare that makes it function, but it's not going to happen most of the time. Considering how poor most of our choices are overall in this set, a 2 cost 15k vanilla is actually a welcome change, and it actually is pretty good. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 here. This is the promo version. Moving on, we have SS3 Son Goku Ever Evolving. 1 cost cantrip is already nice. It also has this really sick energy sync ability where you can pay 1 to look at top 5 for a Son Goku GT or a Pan. So you're not going to get this ability often. Like, you're not going to hit things quite often off the activate main, because the only targets are basically this and then 2 super rares. But having your 1 cost where you have no other energy to speak of and have it dig every turn to try to find one of those 2 cards is really, really nice. I think that this is better than most of the cantrips in the set, and I'm going to give it a 7 like I do with most of the cantrips. It's closer to an 8, but I don't see it winning you the game on its own, so I can't really give it better than a 7. So next up is Pan Great Ape Whisper. 3-drop 15k blocker. So it's already really good stats, and it has a relevant keyword, especially in a set with, again, no negates. There's no real negates in this set outside of like Dr. Weirdo and Green. So yeah, when your life is at 2 or less and you awaken, so if you're basically SS4 leader, when you awaken, you get to play this card for free from your hand. So this card could actually be a 0-15k if you are in the specific leader you need it to be, or are really patient in holding your awaken for the right moment. Usually it's not worth it to, go down to 2 life and just take a bunch of extra damage for no reason just to get this girl on board for free. Having the ability, though, to once per turn, or I should say once per game, switch a yellow battle card to active mode is nutso. Pan, while not anything like super flashy, is just really, really rock solid pretty much for, all of your games. She's going to do something relevant every game. She's either going to be a relevant attacker or relevant defender or a game ender. So that's when we're going to give her an 8 and a high 1 at that. Next up is Vegeta Explosion of Fury. So, Bandai, you kind of dropped the ball on this one. I'm going to give Vegeta a 2. And you're probably like, well, hold on, it's a 1 cost 15k. There's only 1 Bulma in the set, and it's a super rare. So, good luck with that. Next up is Vegeta the Sweet Talker. Yeah, we're just going to throw that 2 back up there. This card is useless unless you decide to play Bulma. If you're playing Bulma, then it's an 8 because it's a blocker for 1 cost. So next up is Potent Technique Vegeta. 3 cost 10k blocker. So it is relevant because it is a blocker. Its stats are somewhat poor, especially when you compare it to Pan. Has auto if you have a blue or yellow multicolor card in your energy at the end of a battle in which you combo this card from your hand, you get to play it. It is a 1 cost 10k, which is pretty nice. There's only 2 blue-yellow multicolor cards in the set. They're rare and a super rare, and you're probably not charging them. So just think of it as a 3 cost 10k blocker that can save you in a pinch, and the fact that it's one of the few 1 cost 10ks that is not a game-ending super rare that you don't want to combo anyway, and you kind of arrive somewhere around a low 7. Next up is Trunks the Cunning. Just like all of the cards in this cycle, this is a 7. It's a standard cantrip. The other effect doesn't really matter. You're just playing because it's a 1 cost that draws 1. Next up is Trunks Saiyan Majesty. 3 cost 15k is a fair rate. Has this really sweet ability when a card is switched to rest mode by one of your abilities, you can just pitch this card to draw another card. And then it has the really sweet ability to pay 1 and remove it from your discard pile to basically switch one of your opponent's cards to rest mode. Usually a blocker, which lets you go for game. So I really like this entire cycle. I think this is a little bit worse than some of the other ones in the cycle, but it's still a really solid pickup. I would give it a 7 simply because of its fair attacking stats with upside of being able to help push through for game later on. Next up is Bulma Brainwash. I know you're like, hey, didn't you say there's only 1 Bulma in the set and it's a super rare? Well, this is Bulma GT, so yeah, it doesn't work for that Vegeta we just talked about. top 3 to search for something is really bad unless you have a lot of hits. Baby, like we previously discussed, they're all like uncommons and rares and super rares for the really good ones. So your odds of hitting a baby are really low off of this. And then, yes, you could get a brainwashed, but yeah, most of the brainwashes aren't particularly good. So I'm not exactly like super thrilled about this card. I'm going to give Bulma a 5, and I know that seems really low for a cantrip, but your odds of hitting something of any real value is really, really low. And I feel like if you are playing Bulma Brainwashed, you really like you're basically building a bad deck. Like I hate to say it, but that's what it feels like. You're playing a lot of really subpar to mediocre cards to try and get a hit, and that's really bad. So when you're playing optimally and not trying to play the bad Brainwash cards, Bulma's more often than not going to whiff every time you play her. A significantly better card, though, is Bola Brainwash, 2-cost, 5k blocker. So, yes, has defense, which I like so much. It has this really sick auto ability, regardless of what your leader is. When she is KO'd, so after you block her, you could choose a baby in your drop area and add it to your hand. That means that in the super late game, if Malicious Majesty or any of the other rare babies that you've opened don't win you the game, you can drop Bola when you're low on life, block with her against their big bomb, recur your big bomb, and actually win the game. I really like this card a lot, and it's one of the better blockers in the set. I would say it's probably top 3 along with the other ones we've discussed in the other videos. Next up is Gotenks the Unpredictable. So the unpredictable part about this card is that the fact that you will need a red and yellow multicolor energy to get max value off of this card. 2-cost 15 is really good, like we just discussed with Goku, and it does cycle you a card. You get to draw, you get to filter, I should say. It's a filter. You get to filter a card off the top of your deck when you play them regardless, but getting the dual attack trigger off a red-yellow charge on turn 1 is just gravy. This card is really, really good. I feel like at all points in the game, it swings for 2 cards in the late game, which is great. And then obviously early on, it is just a solid beat stick. Really think this is one of the better cards at the uncommon rarity in the set. And it's one of the reasons why, along with some of the other cards we'll talk about, I think yellow is probably the best color overall in set 8 for limited. Next up is that card. I didn't think we would arrive at it so soon. You guys know 3-drop 30Ks are broken. 3-drop 30Ks in sets where there's no negates are super broken. I'm actually going to give Mr. Boo a 9, which is a lot higher than I usually give these. I usually give these an 8 if you guys are familiar with it. But this card, literally, there's no other 30Ks in any other color. There's no negates. And most archetypes are just so fragile and rigid that it's almost impossible to like get all the necessary cards to play it. So Mr. Boo is really the standout common of the entire set, and which is why I'm giving it a 9, simply because it does so much. Like this format is largely feels like it's going to be defined by the super rares that you open and what other random odds and ends you got to assemble like some semblance of a constructed deck. There's no real just generically good cards outside of yellow, it feels like, for the most part. So when you see a card this generically good, it is so overwhelming in terms of power compared to the other commons in the set that it's really hard to not say that you shouldn't be going yellow. So next up is my sudden encounter. I know what most of you guys are thinking about this. It's probably like a 2 or a 3 right off the bat, and you would be right most of the time. It is a 3-cost 5k. It's not particularly great. The notable standout thing about Mai is this activate main. If you have 4 more energy, you can sack her to get back a blue-yellow multicolor battle card that costs 4 or less from your drop area. So there is a hit that we'll talk about when we get to the multicolor cards. It's one of the 2 blue-yellow cards actually in the set, and the card is actually really good. So having this as like a tech 1-of to pick back up the hit after it dies can actually win you a game, and that makes me like it a little bit. So I would give Mai a 7, and a low 7, I should say. It's not like a standard 7. It's like somewhere between a 6 and a 7. Yep, there we go. So yeah, somewhere between a 6 and a 7. I would only play 1 copy, and I would only play it if I have hit. If you don't have hit, don't play this card. Next up is Shu. Super combo. I'm going to give it a high 8, by the way, compared to other super combos because the card just looks so freaking awesome. Next up is Baby Vegeta, an unfair choice. This card actually, as the name implies, is unfair. This card is actually stupid and limited. So 3 costs 19k, so it's over stat almost for a 3 drop with an actual effect. Usually it's a 15k if you have an effect. Activate main, you place a card from your hand in the drop area and either KO something in rest mode ignoring barrier or switch something to rest mode ignoring barrier. So card either pushes for game by stopping blockers or kills a bomb for 1 card. It's not once per turn also, so for 2 cards you can kill anything. If you are ahead on board, just don't swing at this guy. Just drop him. If your opponent doesn't have hard removal for him, you can pay 2 cards to kill anything. Straight up, period. And you were just going to run away with the game. I have no idea how you're supposed to deal with this card. It's basically like the draft box Piccolo if it didn't have barrier, but there's way less removal in this format. So there's there's just as few ways to deal with this card as there is to deal with the Piccolo in draft box. So this card is just kind of like, it's really nutty. So I'm going to give this Vegeta a high 9. There is a little bit more ways to deal with this than the Piccolo. The Piccolo has maybe 3 and all of draft box 4. This one probably has 5 or 6 in the set. If you're smart about it and you protect this Baby Vegeta though, I don't see how you lose the game. Next up is Baby Vengeful Upheaval. 3 costs 15k is an okay rate. This EX Evolve is just kind of like gravy. You can use it to evolve on top of the 2 costs, which we talked about in the red video. It's not particularly great. And it has this really, nice upside of this Union Absorbability where you can grab this Unfair Choice or another one of the rares that we'll talk about when we get to the multicolor card. So it does have a little bit of upside, but the main reason I'm going to end up giving this baby a 7 is largely just because it's a 3 cost 15k. Again, there's not too many 2 cost 15ks. There's very few good 2 cost beaters in general. So 3 cost 15ks will have to make do most of the time, and he is one, which is why I like him. Next up is Graceful Charity. It only really works if you're in the yellow baby leader, and man, this one's hard to rate because we already talked about the leader. The leader's not particularly good at all. It's actually really terrible. But this card's really broken. So it's just rough because it's I can't advocate playing a bad leader, but at the same time the card is really broken. It being an uncommon means you're probably only going to have 2 in your sealed pool tops, so having 2 copies of a broken card when you are forced to play a bad leader and a bunch of bad cards doesn't make it worth it. So most of the time I would say no, don't even bother with this card at all. Just don't play it. It's like a 1 or a 2 for most people. If you really are dead set on baby or you just don't have anything else, then I'm going to give it an 8 simply because it's one of the best cards and one of the best reasons to play baby, if not the best reason to play baby. Alright. So next up is Bingo Tournament Grand Prize. Even though this is a 1 cost extra card, it is basically a 1 cost cantrip. Yes, you don't get the body per se, but you actually kind of do at the same time. So you are getting 5k power on your leader. So it's kind of like you're playing a 1 cost 5k that draws you a card, but you are forced to combo the card immediately as soon as you play it. So that's kind of how you have to look at this card. Obviously, it's a little bit worse than the standard cantrip because you can't combo, and if you draw it off your life, it kind of hurts later on. There is no Dragon Balls in the set, so you're not going to get that effect either. I would still give it a 7 simply because it's a really great cantrip. So next up is Return of Planet Tuffle. I don't really see much of a reason for this card. If your opponent's playing Bulma, I would give it a 4 as an okay side deck card to bring against Bulma just to be able to tap all their blockers and try and cut through it all and win the game in a reasonable manner. That's pretty much the best use I can think of for this card. I just don't really see when you would ever really want to just switch 2 cards to rest mode and call it a day. Not for 2 energy at least. Next up is Blutz Wave Generator. This is another 1 cost cantrip. Just being able to dig 5 deep for a baby is pretty good. If you have a surplus of babies, you're basically paying 0 energy to search for a baby in top 5, so it's worth it. Most of the time. So yeah, if you have at least 3 baby targets or maybe even 4 baby targets, I would say is probably the minimum you'd want for Blutz Wave Generator. If you have at least 4 targets, I would consider playing this as many of these as I have. Yes, you can only play 1 a turn, but it does thin out your deck and then find you the actual baby cards. And some of the baby cards are amongst the best cards in the entire set. So I will give this card a 7 like I do with many of the 1 cost cantrips. Next up is Super Gallic Gun. with this really sick SPR. We'll just talk about it with this one. So Super Gallic Gun is really, really good. It's not as good as the green one or the blue one. However, it's still basically just Crusher Ball. Yes, you can only use it 4 life or less, but if you're playing SS4 Goku, that's going to happen, pretty often. Being a 1-cost Crusher Ball, we already know it's basically like a negate. It's not like a true negate, and it's not true removal. But if your opponent taps out for like a 5-cost that they think is going to win the game, and you hit them with Super Gallic Gun, you can probably just kill them on the crackback. So I really, really like Super Gallic Gun simply because it is Crusher Ball. It's actually Crusher Ball with upside. Either is self-replacing, and you can play it while tapped out, which is super, super nice. It's probably the best defensive card in the set in terms of what it can do, just simply because it is kind of like a negate in a set where there's no negates, and then also you can play it while tapped out. Like those are huge upsides to this card. If you open a couple of these, obviously it's an uncommon, so you'll probably see maybe 1 or 2 in your pool. If you open SS4 and like 2 of this, you're in a pretty good spot. I feel like as long as the rest of your yellow pool and then 1 other color is pretty good. So yeah, really, really strong card. So we're going to real quickly jump over to the black cards because there's not too much to say about them. So I figured I would lump them in here with the yellow video. So first up is Dr. Lychee and Hatchak. So this leader, as cool as it is and constructed, this awaken skill is pretty much the death sentence of this. Yes, you can't. You can only play. Or I should say, it's even the permanent here. I was just looking at the awakening, and I already disqualified this card. So you can only play black battle cards as its first permanent, and the second, is that you have to have all black energy, and you have to have 3 cards underneath them from his skill. Like, yeah, constructed monster he is. He's super, super not worth playing in constructed. Just don't. Just please promise me. Even more so than baby, just don't do it. Just don't do it. You're not going to open enough black cards. Most of the black cards in the set that function with him are basically either uncommons or rares. So there's no way you are ever going to get enough black battle cards. Even in draft, I don't think that you will be able to build a mono black deck. There's just not enough cards in the actual packs that will allow you to make a functioning deck. So just avoid at all costs. Picking Hatchak is basically resigning yourself to losing or going like 1 and X at best in a tournament. Next is Hatchak, Fueled by Hatred. This card is actually really good for most decks because it is a 5-cost 25k dual attack, which is really good for a finisher for most people. It also, if you tap out for it and for some reason this guy doesn't win you the game, you can place it in the drop area and it serves as a negate, which is pretty nice, and it can actually save you at some point in the game. You're not going to really get this other effect too often, but it is worth playing some extra black battle cards simply to try to get this activate main ability. So Hatchak is overall a well-rounded super rare for you to open and pretty much slots into every single deck. I don't think there's any deck I would want, not want this card in pretty much in my limited pool, except like 21 Scheme, simply because I can't play it. If you open Hatchak, like, you're just going to jam it again unless you're in 21 Scheme. Next up is Hatchak, Overwhelming Power. Because you basically can't be Hatchak in draft with, any sort of success, this card's a 4-drop 15k with literally nothing else. So it's a 5. You're only really playing it if you need to fuel this guy, Fueled by Hatred, if you need to fuel his activate main. Next up is Dr. Lychee, Inception of the Grudge. This is probably the best out of all of the black cards. I feel like that's not the actual Hatchak super rare. It's a 1-cost blocker. It has this really sick upside. Also, if it gets KO'd by blocking, you get to play a Ghost Warrior from your hand. And there are several that are like, they're not particularly great, but getting a 15k on turn 1 is still pretty good and pretty good synergy. This card is a common, so you might have like 2 to 3 copies of Dr. Lychee. Which is, you're going to basically slot them in any deck anyway, and if you just happen to have the Ghost Warrior, cool, awesome. Next up is Dr. Lychee, the Departed Spirit. 3-cost 10k blocker. Yeah. So when you play this card, you get to mill 2, which has some synergies with cards like Beerus and One-Hit Wonder SS3 and the Trunks that we talked about in this video. So there's some upside to be gained there. Obviously, you're not going to be Hatchak, so you don't get the activate main. 3-cost 10k blocker is like and it's very similar to the Vegeta we talked about earlier in the video, so I'm going to give it a 7. So Frieza, Cooler, Slug, Turles, they're all basically the same card. They all have these very minor effects. 4 cost 15k is whatever. They do have the upside of being able to be played for free off of the Dr. Lychee. I don't really feel like any of these cards, like their Activate main, is super great. I guess Slug is probably the best one. So I would say he's a little bit better than most of them. I'm going to give basically all of these a 5. I would say Slug is probably a 6 simply because he has the ability to warp something as long as it's equal to or greater than your opponent's energy cost. So he's probably the best one for that reason, but I'm not really thrilled about paying 4 for any of these guys. Ghost Warriors, that's a cantrip. You guys already know how it is. It's a cantrip. Next up is Defender Gorgodon. It's an 8. It's a super combo. Even if you are not playing a black leader, if you don't open enough on-color super combos, you can still play off-color super combos. It's still a 0-10k combo, guys. Next up is Defender Kawazu. Since Hatchak is really bad in Limited, this guy's going to always be a 3-drop. I really don't like paying 3 to cantrip, so I'm going to give him like a 3 or a 4. I think that it's very similar to the Bulma extra card we talked about in the blue video. It's even worse than that because you don't get the upside of the 5k for the turn. Yeah, it's not good. Just don't play it. Destron Gas. Again, we already talked about this. You're not playing Hatchak, so it just don't even bother. The Dark Planet. So if you do have a lack of playables and you do have a couple of Ghost Warriors, especially this 1-drop one, because it is a Ghost Warrior, you have a couple of these, like 3 or 4 of these Ghost Warrior cantrips, teching in the 1 copy of the Dark Planet isn't exactly the worst thing. It does thin the deck, and there is some utility. Like if you have like 2 Lychee blockers and like 2 of the 1-drop cantrip cards and then like 1 Lord Slug in your deck, like yeah, I could see you teching in 1 copy of Dark Planet. So I'll give it a 6, you know, somewhere between a 5 and a 6. Like it's not exciting, but it does have some applications, and I do like it for that reason. Ultimate Blow is probably the most useful out of all the black cards. There is a surplus of blockers, I'm sure you guys have noticed in this set. So Ultimate Blow is a counterplay that gives something 10k and Revenge. This card can basically halt an opponent's turn in its tracks when used properly. So for that reason, I'm going to give it an 8 because it's kind of like a negate or a Crusher Ball in the sense that any smart player is not going to suicide into a blocker with this card up with Revenge. So yeah, it's a really good roadblock for one, and any deck can play it as long as you are playing at least 3 or 4 blockers. I would say teching one of these is worth it. And then finally we have Super Kamehameha. It is a 1 cost, and it's basically the cycle with like, you know, Absolute Release Ball, Focused Breakthrough, Super Gallic Gun. Since Hatchak is basically unplayable and he's the only leader that can use it, we're going to say it's a 1. It's basically a dud. You just don't play Hatchak. It's really just not worth it. So I know that there's Heroic Strike and Villainous Counter Strike still to talk about for black cards, but I want to kind of save the campaign rares to talk about with the multicolor cards. So that's going to be it for this video here today, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Again, if I can improve on this in any way, please let me know by leaving a comment down below. I'll try to have the multicolor cards up sometime tomorrow. And then on Friday, for you guys who are members of the 3xG Patreon, I will do a cheat sheet giving you guys the 5 best commons and uncommons for each color to kind of help you guys smooth over your deck building when it comes to building for your pre-releases. And that's it for me, guys. Until next time. Okay, bye.